Building analytics rules, we're going to go through the advanced one this time through. We have a little less material, and they've given us some more time, so we'll have a lot more time for questions and answers on anything that you want related to AIE or even logarithms.
Are you going to teach us how to respond to phishing, or are you going to teach us how to phish people and defraud them for money?
Saltwater or freshwater?
You can teach how to catch them, but if you want to see how to fish people, go talk to Greg.
Okay.
I'm sure he'd be happy to tell you.
There's a theme here. They keep roping me in. Last year they had me do threat hunting. This time it's teach them to fish. They figured out how to get me to volunteer for these sessions, and then they changed the topic. I'm Vaughn Adams, sales engineer with Logarithm. Been with the company 3 years. Prior customer for 5. Went through Kroll, walked around. I'm in the Philadelphia area.
I'm Sally. I'm a network security engineer with the Analytic Copilot team out of ProServe, and before that I was a principal engineer for Logarithm for 4 years.
These were the three tracks that we've done. These are going to be available on community, both the slides. Sally and I, whether we get good video out of this or we may just end up recording one session that has all these. So if you didn't hear the other sessions and you want them, or you want to share this with your coworker, this is a resource available for you. We're going to go through the feedback rules and risk-based priorities, but before we do that, I'd like to get an idea who's created custom analytics rules. 1, 2, 3, okay. 4. We've done this one in a while, was it? Yes.
Yeah, it was. We've only done this once. Cool. All right. So something really important to know about AI rules is that every time an AI rule triggers, it generates a log that goes into your events database. So you can set a rule to run and it doesn't have to alarm, and you can also use that special AIE log source type to feed back into other rules here. So you have a drop down for your data source for any AI rule block that you use. You can have data processor, which is your default, or you can have AI engine events. If you use that, you're going to have to use a filter to look for those specific common events here. And this can be really good for a couple of reasons. You can look for multiple events at once, and I think this is on the second slide, but just a pretty powerful thing that you can do.
One caveat with the filter criteria: if you are using AIE as input or filter, you cannot filter on log source type or specific log sources because it's a little abstracted in the events layer. Same linking that we talked about in earlier sessions, and a little bit of detail maybe on the why you may want AI rules to alarm, or you may not want to. Maybe you don't want to flood your dashboard with a bunch of alarms. You can just have it set to create events, and then we'll go through some examples where you can correlate alarms and just show the higher level alarm. I think there were a couple other sessions where we talked about that. I think it was the threat hunting session where they showed different levels of the threat lifecycle management, maybe being a limited alarm on intermediate ones or final ones.
Right, so the first one here is correlation. So it might be a user or host who is triggering multiple AI rules. One alone might not be actionable, but multiple triggered by the same rules or user might be something that you want to look into. We can reuse logic here, and this is going to be mainly for expensive rule blocks like some of the trend and some of the statistical here. If you want to use those again, don't run the same rule block again, just feed back that common event into a different rule. Something that you can also do is look at the RBP for your alarms, and we'll talk about RBP in a second, but you can have RBP as a threshold field or a field that you evaluate on at different alarms. Also, if you're linking rule blocks, there is a 3 rule block limit, and you can kind of hack your way through that by using AI feedback rules and end up with technically more.
Another one too is that there's certain rule blocks that can't be linked together in the same rule.
Yep.
So you can split them up into 2 or more AIE blocks and just use this feedback mechanism to chain them together.
So this is a cool one. I've done a few similar. This uses our account abnormal process rules, but I've also done this for just things like brute force rules, various types of authentication errors, and I've had my group by be user origin. So this is a list of rules: abnormal process activity, auth behavior, and so one of them being triggered might not be an issue, but here we're looking for if the same user triggers 3 or more of the rules, then we're going to set this alarm on.
Yeah. This is one that I use in my environment that was really important to me. So I wanted to get this out there for 2 reasons. One, to show how we can split a problem into 2 parts. And I use a little bit of reuse here. I also wanted to point out the correlation that was really important to me that we used. And the problem was that we were trying to solve with it was detecting things like BitTorrent on the network. Next generation firewalls typically won't detect things like BitTorrent or even some more advanced protocols. We were a heavy NetMod shop. And we would correlate network data to Windows host firewall data. With Windows host firewall, it shows you which IP was open, source port, destination port, which process that ran it, process ID. Then we correlated that to Windows Sysmon or accounting. I think there's been a lot of discussion in the past couple days on Sysmon. So this was a correlation that was important to me to go from what's on the network all the way back to the hash value of the process that ran it. And I would use Smart Response to lock down or respond to these things very quickly. And this was very, very important to our security organization. So aside from the use case, it's an example of making it easier to debug, manage, because it's in 2 parts. Also reuse. Here's how I rebuilt my environment at home. The first 2 blocks on the top, a little hard to read, but it's 2 blocks that are chained together. The first one is data coming from network monitor, and we're looking for BitTorrent traffic. The second block on the upper right is traffic allowed by host firewall. This is really coming from the Windows audit logging. You don't have to put Windows firewall on there. Out of the box, Windows will do some logging for you. You just need to enable the policy. So it allowed us to correlate from the network application to the process ID that created it. And this fires an AIE event called, I think in this case it was AIE misuse torrent network. I actually have another rule that's kind of similar to that where I do Tor network detection. Okay, yeah, they're kind of misleading with similar names. But there could be other ones too, like WannaCry detection, which process created, let me lock it down. So it's an example of breaking the problem into 2 problems and then correlating that all the way back to the process, because we have an input with a process ID and a host origin correlating to a Sysmon logs. And actually looking at this, I probably could have cleaned up some of my group buys. I was doing a little bit of experimentation with that.
Could have used the summary fields.
If you want Smart Response, I needed these for Smart Response because I had to lock down the hash value, I needed the process ID, and some other information. So this is an example of AIE in 2 parts with the inputs. And the data source on the block in the bottom left is Advanced Intelligence Engine events.
That's our feedback.
Yep, the feedback. And the second one is actually we're back to a normal log.
Yeah, this is a cool example. I mean, it really has everything. And something else that I'll point out is the hash in the group by fields of the last picture there. Hash is one of the new metadata fields added in 7.3. Did it come in 2?
Census, yeah, I have customer. Maybe not. You know what? I take that back. Maybe you're right. It's 3. I'll blame the color on it.
Yeah, exactly. It's the low amount of oxygen here.
Yeah, I like my oxygen. The risk-based priority, we're talking about tuning risk-based priority in your environment. There's a setting, a platform setting that you could use. So this is, do you want your analytics rules to determine what the risk-based priority, or do you want it to be host-based or a balance of the 2? If you go to the platform manager, there's a easy setting for this that makes a determination of how you want that platform configured. I think by default, I think we do risk rating and influence out of the box. When we do deployments, if it's balanced or host influenced, I think that's a custom one.
So we're pointing this out because a question that we often get is, hey, my RVPs for my alarms, they don't really match. They should be higher, they should be lower, but it takes some tuning, so this is how you do it.
an example of specifying in the rules. The risk rating of 72 is calculated through both the risk rating, the false probability, and the environmental dependence factor. And Sally, you want to walk us through how they're related?
Sure. The higher the risk rating, the higher the RBP of your alarm is. And then false positive and environmental dependence are inverse. So the higher those are, the lower the RBP of the resulting alarm will be. Environmental dependence is how much tuning this rule is going to take to reduce false positives.
So here's an example for host, and this one was important to me in my organization because I had some systems in my network that were subject to compliance. So my entire network was not subject to compliance, but some of it, Sarbanes-Oxley. And when I had analytics or even just normal events that fired, I wanted to be able to give these systems a little bit more attention first. An example would be, if it's high on these critical systems, it's like critical. If it's a high rating on a normal system, it's just high. I wanted to be able to kind of bump up the priority for these particular hosts. You specify in the Entity tab, there's a risk rating, risk level for the host that you can assign. Networks can also be assigned a risk. It's not in the host entity record. There's a fairly detailed description of how risk-based priority is calculated in the help section. And if you look up risk-based priority RBP, it'll give you all the factors that are used for calculating the values.
I think there actually, I was checking there the other day, and there might be a model that you can use in there. Like I've modeled that calculation in MATLAB before, and I think there might be one that customers can use, which is pretty cool.
Sally, your engineering degree, Sean.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
No,
You have an RBP calculator you can download from the community, and it'll lay out the whole formula, and you can do what-if scenarios, run what-if scenarios through it, changing your values and see how your end result.
That's good to know. I knew that we had an RBP calculator. Actually, I thought it only lived in ProServe, so I'm glad we released that on prior communities. I guess we can update this to also say the RBP calculator. Have you used the calculator?
Yes.
Comments on it?
It's better than nothing. And in fact, your help file no longer has the full calculations in it. That was an older version that had the full calculations. Now the help file doesn't have them anymore, so this is the only way I know to see the actual full formula.
So what version are you on?
733. Unless you brought it back in.
I think it's back in 7.4 because again, it's been a long week. I believe it's back, and if it's not, it should be. I mean, it's a documentation error.
All right, one more time. So if you're building a custom rule, first thing to do, identify your use case. Is this alarm going to be actionable? Am I going to assign this to a SOC team member for investigation? Am I going to run one of our really cool 7.4 playbooks with it? If it's not actionable, then it might be better as a report or a saved investigation. For KB log sources, or for KB rules as well, make sure you have all of your required log sources and that all of your lists are populated. Generally, before building a custom rule, I recommend running an investigation just for that type of data, just to see how much you're going to get back, check what your group by field should be, things like that. Watch out for evaluation times. These are for multi-row block rules and for your behavioral, because those have a huge impact on memory. Use alarm suppression. You don't want the same rule for the same host triggering, 10 different times an hour, so set that guy. Also, use AI feedback rules to duplicate expensive rule blocks like trend and statistical. Again, use alarm suppression. We have that on there twice. And watch out for inefficient regex or large list used in any of your filters.
I think that's the one we should have twice, right? Inefficient regex and large lists.
Oh yeah, I've seen that in a behavioral rule.
Wow, well, actually I've seen one where it was a very large list looking for DNS threat information that ran a lot. And what was the technical term we used for AIE? It was
Tanking.
tanking, yes, it was tanking.
So rules, AI rules generate common events, and those are used to trigger an alarm. You don't have to have every rule triggering an alarm. And when you're building custom rules, I recommend just a trial period while you're reducing your false positives, and that way you don't spam your analyst or spam your dashboard with alarms that are too high false positive. Again, watch out for inefficient rules. That might be regex, that might be large lists, that might be using threshold or another type of aggregation on highly unique fields. And a symptom of a rule that needs to be reworked for one of those reasons is spooling DAT files in your AIE data directory. That's a symptom, and the fix is going to be looking at the AIE rules dashboard in Deployment Monitor. And the rule that's going to have the highest memory, the highest CPU, is probably the one you're going to want to start investigating.
In that same place, there's another column that you can look at for events that are being generated off of that rule, or number of log sources that are being evaluated by those rules. So those are other indicators that you can use for finding the culprit.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that, because if you actually have a rule that's set not to alarm, sometimes you can miss how many events it generates. So I had a support case actually that I got called into where their events database was filling up, and that was because they had a non-alarming AI rule that wasn't watched, and it was generating tens of thousands of events a second.
I hope that wasn't one of my tickets.
No, it was not.
I actually did that with email enabled. Took down my internal Exchange relay.
Oh no.
Yes,
That was like day 4 of my deployment.
so I guess that's alarm suppression. Actually, maybe we should add one on, don't set yourself to email. That's a good tip.
The large lists, is there a theoretical limit, or is it dependent on system performance and the other rule blocks and what else is going on in the system?
Yeah, it depends on what you're doing in your filters, and so regex, any use of regex in your filters, well, you'll want to use a shorter list if that's an input. But the main issue with those is what your messages per second are.
Okay.
So if you're only doing like 100 logs per second through your deployment, go for it. Use a list of like tens of thousands of entries. But
Yeah, I created a list where I'm pulling Active Directory for disabled accounts, and then dumping that to a file that the list manager picks up. And then that list is tagged to an AI engine rule that alarms when a disabled account is attempted to be authenticated.
Yeah,
It's got
that's
about
a good one.
7,000 names in it.
That's a great use case.
I had to turn it off.
Oh,
well,
It was crashing, and it was crashing ARM too.
yeah, because you're looking at authentication success, which is a very active log source. So you're getting a lot of evaluations against that rule.
Yeah, and it's, even if I limit it down, I still have to do security, Windows, all.
Yeah.
So it's still a ton of event sources.
That one's kind of tough. I use in threat lists. I've had some customers that use threat lists. It looks for, there's no primary filter criteria, so like in the primary filter criteria, if you go back to the filter order, it's maybe one of the things that get evaluated. It's evaluating for every single log that comes through. One thing that I've done, tune that, maybe I only want this on, if it's a firewall deny, I don't really care, right? I blocked it, maybe. If it's from my guest network, again, I don't really care, not my problem. So I can filter out a lot of these evaluations for some of the traffic and then just kind of cut down on the number of evaluations on the big list with regex.
For the disabled users use case, I would look at excluding like Exchange email logs. You're just gonna have so much misconfiguration or people who had email set up on their phone on the company. You're gonna get lots of hits for that. So you're a little bit more focused on what log sources you want to target. That sort of thing. That can be a good way to filter out that noise and be more efficient with AI.
It's a great tip.
absolutely. And here you're going to want to remember your evaluation order for AI rules. So the higher up in the stack you can make exclusions. So log source is a really good one because it's evaluated before any of your primary include or exclude. So that's a good place to go to reduce the scope and to reduce the resource utilization.
We've got a few more minutes, so I didn't want to plug, I think we hit the spooling. Echo, we have Logarithm Echo coming. Logarithm Echo allows us to replay logs in the environment. So if you're building analytics use cases, you can hand feed the logs that you would expect to trigger the alarm, and you can use that for testing. It's going to be released. Give us a couple weeks. It's still working its way through the process. We use it for running demos, or actually we did the capture the flag exercise. We ran Echo to generate the same data across the 13 instances that we had. Useful tool that could help you debug. Also, community.logarithm.com. There is a lot of great material on there. If you're not signed up for community, we recommend it. If you have questions, if you have excellent use cases you'd like to share, or the tips that you have with filtering, hey, I had a problem, this is how I solved it, we really appreciate those because that could really help other users in the community. And we also have another resource, which is the Analytics Copilot service.
Yeah, we're all about custom content, whether it's custom AI rules, custom smart response playbooks. We're all for that, and we'll help you as well with our default modules.
All right, so we have a few minutes left. Any questions? Take the one in the back. Echo Replay, it's independent of version. It's just a standalone utility. Actually, what it is, it's a simulated system agent. So it directly injects log source data directly into the data processor through a fake agent. And it works on many different versions. I've used it on 7.3 and 7.4. I'm not sure if it works on 7.2.
I've only used it on 7.4, but it seems like it should work on 7. You said it worked on 7.3?
Yeah, it definitely works on 7.3.
Nice.
Sorry, the next question. Yeah, it was you.
Wanted to see what the use case would be for the alarms, not the AI engine, but alarms.
What do you want?
So what would you use those for? Those just the built-in monitoring for the logarithm system?
Yeah.
Or?
Yeah, so those are what I like to call our old school alarms. They came out before we even had AI. What we're using them for now is AI deployment data only, so errors within AI itself. And so if you have any actual like threat rules, I recommend moving them to AI. The old style alarms also have the restriction of that they only look at events that are in your events database, whereas AI is fed all of the logs from your data processor.
So there's other, beyond AI, there's other health check information as part of the new updated deployment monitoring package. Yeah, totally agree. AIE is a better way to go. Also, like if you call support, they're going to assume that if you have a problem with an alarm, they're going to assume it's coming from AIE. I mean, most of our customers use AIE, just a couple old school alarms floating around.
Yeah, just a good tip too is if you maybe inherited a deployment for somebody else or your deployment has been running for a long time, go back and check and see if there are any threat rules hidden there in your old style alarms. They may not be alarming and you may want to move them over.
That's a good tip. I have run into a lot of those with the older customers, and I'm not checking those as frequently as I should.
Yep, yeah, I had to start doing it after getting burned a couple times.
Yeah, so do you recommend then even moving like the platform monitoring pieces in the old alarms over to AI?
No, I would not.
Okay.
I would
No.
be monitoring a standalone AIE. I mean, it's a standalone old school alarm.
Okay.
Would you agree?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
There's another, since we're talking about kind of health checks, the health monitoring, Grafana is another great way to do that. If you have Grafana, particularly in 7.4, you can create alarms, emails or events directly out of the Grafana database or the Grafana interface. So it's really kind of out-of-band management of the logarithm system. So if you're seeing things like too many events going to data processor down, those types of things, take a look at it when you get to 7.4 in particular.
It's so cool because also AIE, it will let you know if AI goes down. So it's like who's watching the Watchmen, and in this case, like if your AIE is down, you can't get an alarm on it. There are some like workarounds in the old style alarms, but now with Grafana and the new 7.4 monitoring, you have a second Watchman on that.
So with the recommendation of moving from the old alarms to AIE alarms, how do I do an event where I have my network threat stuff broken up into like 25 different subcategories and individual alarms, and I was doing an old style alarm to pull those together? Is there a way to do that through AIE? I want the analyst to get one alarm type regardless of which one of the individual rules fires.
Yeah, so a couple ways to do that. So you could import so if you have a bunch of old school alarms, you can import those as individual AIE alarms, and then you can use that feedback to kind of, hey, I've seen this one over, a certain period of time, alarm. Can you think of another solution for that?
I think that's the easiest way to do it.
But it's recommended to do it that way instead of the old school alarms.
Yeah, for threadless I would. Yeah, it's much easier to maintain, support, to run better. I mean, if you're going through the transition, or anytime you make a change, I would recommend, kind of go slowly, make sure it's doing what you want. Echo is a great way to test to make sure that they're firing.
And again, one of the holdups of using those old style alarms is that they only look at events and not, about 1% or less of your logs should be going into the events database. So you could be getting like some false negatives that are missed just because you're using the old style.
So it's 40, I think like 40 or 45 rules, the AIE engine rules. And then I'm watching for a certain one of those to fire off to create an alarm for the SOC analyst. And so, do I need to do a feedback?
Yep.
Yeah, I do feedback, yeah.
Okay.
We have 4:20.
All right.
That means we're done for today. We're going to go back to the other session after the meeting. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. And just let us know if you have any questions.
Yeah, we love this stuff, so please stop us and ask us any questions. Yeah, we're nerds.